Well, good afternoon, folks. This is Bill Costanzo, Livestock Guardian Dog Program Specialist with AgriLife Extension. Today we are doing our 41st live Facebook Q&A session. I do want to thank our sponsors, both Lone Star Tracking and Spot On Fence. Please help support those vendors that do support this program and provide funding for doing this Q&A session for you. If you have any follow-up questions or any comments, please go ahead and post those in the comments section. And if there's anybody that didn't get in a question that wants to do one, we'll probably have a little bit of time today, although we do have quite a few questions already pre-posted. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first question is from Jennifer and Derek. They're definitely a frequent follower of the program. But they have an alpha female who tries to kill any pups who aren't hers or who haven't been raised there at the ranch. She says that she's at the point that the female is costing her more than she's worth. And do I have any ideas on stopping this bad behavior? She is her absolute best guardian. We have also had to relocate 2 adult females to other ranches because they refuse to enter the pasture with this alpha female. So Jennifer, I guess my first question to you, and hopefully you're logged on, or maybe if later on if you see the video, I guess my question to you was, have you tried using an e-collar on this alpha female? I'm just kind of curious to see if you've tried to do anything like that, when she's being aggressive towards others, and see if that, kind of corrects the problem. But that is definitely something that I would strongly encourage you doing. There's also a pheromone spray that's on the market that a producer kind of in a similar situation used a while back. She had some limited results with it, but it may be something that would be worth looking into for you and using that product to see if you can kind of cure any of those dominant issues that are coming up. The other producer who used it definitely had pups from weaned pups to like older, say, bonded pups that were being killed by an alpha female in her pack, and she had a fairly sizable pack of Kangles. And like I said, she had kind of some limited results with that. My other question to you, Jennifer, is have you tried reaching out to like a certified canine behaviorist? If not, and that's something that you're interested in doing, let me know. I can definitely provide you with at least one name and a couple contacts that might be able to find some more for you in your general area. Next up, we've got, I think it's Kaylee Jane Holtz. She wanted to know if we've trained any dogs to guard poultry, and if so, what does the process look like? Well, ma'am, we haven't specifically trained any guard dogs to protect poultry, mainly because our funding source up until, I guess, a month ago now, was the Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board, and so their funding only applied to guard dog projects related to sheep and goats. Now, will we be doing any of that in the future? I'll say possibly. We are currently working on a project with bonding dogs with cattle. Now, back to your question about the birds, however. I would strongly encourage you, to get a weaned pup and start with that instead of trying to get an older dog that, may or may not have any experience with poultry, and put that puppy inside of a pen in your poultry area. And the pen for the puppy needs to be big enough where they can move around and burn off some puppy energy and have feed and water and things like that. But as you go out every day to check on the birds and to collect eggs, clean, feed, that type of thing, my recommendation would be to take the puppy out of the cage or pen area and tether them to you and allow them to walk along with you while you're taking care of things for the birds. As time goes on, you can stop the tether, and what I would probably do is just leave the tether attached to the puppy still, just dragging along. And that way, in case the puppy starts to chase a bird at some point or grabs one and starts to chew on it or something like that, you can quickly grab them, with that leash or tether that's just kind of dragging along when they're loose with you. As that time goes along, and the puppy gets used to that, then I would probably move to not having a tether at all, and eventually allowing the puppy to have some free time that's definitely well supervised, when you're out there or when somebody else is out there. And then, as that puppy gets older, the pen that's kind of inside the poultry pen area may need to get bigger, or you may need to move it outside of that poultry area and put it right next to it so that the dog still has some contact and sees and hears the birds and things like that and can bark and kind of help protect it. But the puppy needs to, definitely have room to burn off energy. You're definitely going to need to take the puppy on walks. If you have a small poultry area, and give it things like bones to chew on and stuff like that, so that it's not building up excess puppy energy that it's going to take out on the birds when it does get released into that area. The biggest thing with dogs, guard dogs with poultry, is taking things very slow and having a lot of supervision and management time for that dog. It's definitely different than like with sheep or goats or even with cattle. You really just have to take a lot of time and take things very slow. And as that puppy matures and you gain some confidence in that puppy, allow them more and more free time, with the birds just loose, not in their pen, not tethered up or anything like that. Your hardest time is going to be between probably 8 and about 18 months of age, when that puppy is going through adolescence. They'll likely be fairly good up until about that point. And then, everything's going to kind of overnight become a problem, and you'll find some birds that are chewed on, or maybe some birds that are dead or something like that. I definitely would caution you, if you have any, I guess I would say, special birds that are maybe like birds that your kids show for 4-H or for FFA, or a bird that's very friendly, that's kind of a pet or something. Do not leave your puppy loose unsupervised in an area where those birds are at, because you can likely end up with some dead birds because of that. The other thing that I'll say is, just about everybody that I've talked to that does guard dogs with poultry, you do kind of have to expect that you're going to have some sacrificial birds in the training process to eventually, provide protection for the whole. And so I would just kind of plan on that type of thing, not purposely allowing the dog to kill anything, obviously, but just knowing that guard dogs have a very hard mouth. And they're not like a hunting dog that has a soft mouth where they're just going to barely pick up the bird. A guard dog, whether they are trying to kill a chicken or not, they're going to pick it up very hard, and likely, you're going to end up with a broken chicken at the end of the process. So just kind of plan on that as part of the training process. Next question is from Pamela. She wanted to know if I can discuss why young dogs sometimes drag lambs around and ways to curb this behavior. Well, Pam, your guard dog puppies are definitely playing with those lambs, and it's what we call rough play, and it's a very common behavior in adolescent dogs, and it shouldn't carry on into adulthood, but if you don't stop it, it definitely can and will. And so I would deal with that behavior fairly sternly, by yelling at the dog, swatting them on the butt, probably putting a drag or a dangle stick of some sort on them, and, helping slow their behavior down, so that before they can get a hold of that lamb and start dragging it around, with a dangle stick or drag, that's going to slow that puppy down and hopefully allow those lambs to get away from them. If you're dealing with kind of when you say a young dog, if you're in the age range of probably, a year to 18 months, or maybe even a little bit over 18 months, at that point, Pam, I would move straight to an e-collar. When those dogs get to be older like that, they're getting more and more set in their ways, and those behavior patterns are starting to become permanent. And so, if you're at that point, you need those behaviors to stop immediately. And so that's when I would move to an e-collar. And what I would do is what I've mentioned many times on these Q&As, is I would purposely set the dog up. I would put them in a pen with several young lambs, and have the collar on the dog, have it set to high, have all the the tone, the vibrate, and the shock all set to high, and then just move away and kind of watch them from a distance. And anytime that dog goes near the lamb, I would go through the motions of tone, vibrate, shock. Some dogs don't even need to get to the shock. My border collie, for instance, he hates the vibrate almost more than the shock. And so you may not need to get to that point of actually shocking the dog. But I would go through and do that training daily for probably 20 to 30 minutes for 5 to 7 days, and generally that behavior stops after that. So it's not like this will take a really long time to correct that behavior. Next up, we have Yvette. She has a 6-month-old Maremma with poultry full-time, and there's usually an adult with him, but she's been desexed already and taken off the farm temporarily. The Maremma pup has never chased or harmed a bird and follows the geese around, sleeps with them. That's all good behavior. And Yvette wants to know if she can still expect bad behavior during the adolescence from this Maremma pup. Well, I hate to tell you, Yvette, but yes, I would expect some bad behavior to come up. This puppy's fairly young still, only at 6 months, and probably it hasn't even hit adolescence yet. And so hopefully, that adult dog that you had fixed can come back and, be with that pup soon. Again, as I mentioned earlier with the other question, make sure that puppy has plenty of time to exercise away from the poultry, both the chickens and the geese, and, give them a cow leg bone to burn off some energy, something to chew on and take out frustrations on instead of, on the birds, which is probably going to happen at some point if you don't. Again, as I mentioned, don't leave any special birds or pet birds or anything like that where that puppy's going to be, because they'll likely end up chewed up because they're going to be a little more submissive, and just because they're used to being around humans, it's easier for the dogs to catch those birds. And again, also take them on some perimeter walks, walks around the property to help burn off some of that puppy energy. The more that you can do that, the better. And also work on tether training your pup. Give them some vehicle rides once in a while. All those things kind of help change up their daily activity and helps them burn off some of that energy that he's definitely going to be having at some point soon. Next up, we've got Mike McCorkle. He just adopted a 3-year-old Anatolian mix to guard a small goat herd. She's confined right now in a 50 by 50 pen with them that he uses to clear brush. A couple of the African dwarfs are butting the dog when the goats are being corralled in a small space to move them back to the barn. He says the Nubians are not an issue, and the dog backs off and hides behind him whenever this happens. He says, I don't think it's an issue except when they're grouped up. I can separate her while we're getting ready to move, but he wondered if she might get aggressive towards the goats if they butt her when she gets too close in other situations. They don't have any cross fencing right now, so he can't let the dog just kind of roam around. So Mike, your concern is definitely a valid one, and I would say, is possibly likely to cause some aggression in the dog at some point. Now, I generally have only seen that type of thing with puppies that have grown up in that type of environment where they're getting constantly bullied by, a very aggressive ram or Billy or you or Nanny or something like that. Since this dog is already 3 years old, she should be okay. And she does need to learn, depending on where she came from, not to invade, those goats space or sheep space, or whatever animal that they're guarding. A lot of times these dogs that come from rescues or that you get adopted may not have learned some of those type of behaviors at previous locations, and that could be why they were, needing adoption. I would just kind of move cautiously with this situation, and if you can, pull the dog out whenever you're moving the goats around back to the barn or out to the pen, and then put her in, after that happens, back with them. That's probably the easiest thing to do, and will avoid that situation from happening altogether. I would say, if you can increase the size of your pen, that would probably be helpful as well. If it's kind of a permanent thing that you move around, maybe it's on wheels or something, try using some of that portable electric netting from Premier Livestock. I use quite a bit of that stuff myself at home, and it's very effective. And I have dogs that have a tendency to roam. I have Great Pyrenees at home, and they definitely don't roam inside the areas that have the electric net fencing. As a matter of fact, they won't even jump it. They don't even come near it. And so that might be something for you to check out. Next question is from Shannon Adamson. She lives in California near Yosemite, and they've currently been having several active wildfires that have increased the smoke in the air where she lives. She has a 1-year-old Maremma who's outside 24/7, and she's concerned that because the air quality index has been consistently high in the unhealthy range recently. And she wants to know at what point should one take action to make sure the guard dog is not adversely impacted by the poor air quality, given their need to protect all day long. Are there any suggestions when you can't bring them inside? Is this just a hazard of their job, or should anything be done for their safety? And she thanks me in advance. So I appreciate you reaching out, Shannon. This is definitely a question that I haven't gotten before, and so I appreciate those new questions that come in like this one. And so, like I said, I definitely haven't had this one in the past. Here's what I would say in that situation. I know everybody loves their guard dogs, and they do an excellent job, and we want them to be healthy. If the air is difficult for you to breathe outside, then it's probably difficult for your dog and your livestock as well. And while everybody's generally concerned about their guard dogs, I would say that you should also be concerned about your livestock. Just like when we get the questions about, well, what's too cold for your guard dog to be outside? Well, if it's too cold for your livestock to be outside, it's too cold for your guard dog. And so I'm going to kind of go along with that same type of thinking, with this. If it's, too smoky outside and it's difficult for you to breathe, Shannon, then I would say the same thing for your dog and for your livestock as well. And so, there could be temporary locations set up at like fairgrounds and things like that where you could take your dog and your livestock. Obviously, you have to take feed to those locations, and you have to go there and feed them and make sure they have water and such. But generally, those things are available. And so that might be something that you want to look into, or seeing if that's set up someplace where you can remove, if it gets that bad, where you can remove your dog and livestock before the air just becomes completely unhealthy and they're unable to breathe. If that's not something, if you have a barn and you can set up some sort of large air purification system, while I know that sounds expensive, in the area that you're in, I know that you get frequent wildfires, and so it may not be something that is unnecessary in the long term. It might be something that is a very good investment to be able to bring those animals inside, out of the smoky air, in some sort of an area that you can keep fairly well purified. Other than that, there's really probably nothing else that you're going to be able to do. I would encourage you, if the wildfires are that close, to definitely have an action plan on evacuating your dogs and your livestock should the need arise. It's definitely better to plan ahead for those kind of things and actually even practice those measures than waiting until the fire's coming up the hill, and it's going to be an extremely dangerous situation at that point. So that's all I have for recommendations for everybody, and questions to answer today. I will give a shout out to Sarah Smith. Thanks for logging on as always, Sarah, and I see Ellen Scott's also on here today. If anybody else has any follow-up questions, or I know I have the one post from Jennifer and Derek. If either one of them are on, I'd be happy to answer or follow up on some of those things with them. I guess while we're waiting to see if there's any more comments to come in from anybody that posted questions today, I did get the Akbosh webinar posted onto the YouTube channel, so if you're interested in that, that is on our YouTube channel at this point. We also have the webinar coming up in November. I believe it's on November 21st. Let's see here real quick. November 20th. We have Dr. Catherine Lord will be presenting again. She has done some canine behavior and bonding and imprinting and things like that webinars for us in the past, and so she's going to be speaking about a large DNA project that she has going on. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't gone on to Darwin's Ark, the working dog portion of that, I would encourage you to go onto that website and fill out the paperwork, get a test kit, and get that submitted. I'm hoping at some point to be able to do a guardian dog project with her, and any of those, anybody that submits that data will be helpful at that point in time when we finally find funding for that large-scale guard dog DNA project. I got a couple questions that come in here. Here's one from Shannon Adamson. It says, how do you get the grounding rods into the ground? It says the post pounder doesn't seem to work well. Well, Shannon, generally what I do is I do use a post pounder. I get them in until the post pounder, won't, when it's hitting the ground finally, I guess is what I say, is when I stop. And then generally what I use is just a sledgehammer. And, the farther that you get it driven into the ground, the easier it is with the sledgehammer. When you first start and it's probably, say, 3 feet out of the ground, that thing's going to wobble all over the place like that each time that you hit it. And so you get about one hit, and then you have to wait for a few seconds for that rod to stop moving around. But that's generally what I use. I have thought about, however, making a special attachment, of some sort on a regular post pounder, maybe with a smaller piece of pipe that might make it a lot easier to put ground rods into the ground, because I know it's not the most easiest thing that you can do all the time. Well, I don't know if you saw Sarah's post, Shannon, but she has a similar issue in Oklahoma clay, she says, and what they do is wet the ground a little bit. And I am fairly familiar with, I know you're up in Yosemite, but I'm very familiar with the hard pan down in the Central Valley of California. It can be very difficult to put posts in there. It's almost like driving through cement. Any other questions or comments from anybody today? Let's see here. Well, you're welcome, Shannon. Thank you, Kevin, for the comment there. I do want to make a plug for the Texas Guard Dog Association. For any of those of you that are either here in Texas or a close surrounding state, they are having a Guardian Dog Field Day on October the 25th, I believe. It'll be in Waco at the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. And so they already have, I think, 5 or 6 vendors set up, and they'll have some workshops. I'll be giving one. Dr. Tomachek, who's done some webinars for us here and has spoken at some of our field days, will also be doing a workshop there. And they've got Noble Research will be doing a talk, and there's some other folks as well. So you can go on to the Texas Livestock Guardian Dog Association website and register for that field day if that's something that you're interested in, and you can also find out some more information there. So I think that's about all I have for today. Again, I do want to thank our sponsors, Lone Star Tracking, and also Spot On Fence. You know, if you're looking for any type of GPS trackers or even water monitors now, Lone Star Tracking is also doing well and tank monitoring systems, and they're fairly effective, and they'll send you an alert, you know, if it gets below a certain level for you. And also Spot On Fence, if you're looking for any type of virtual fence collar, I would encourage you to reach out to Spot On Fence. Their collar is a 3-in-1 system. It does the virtual fence, it does GPS tracking, and it also has an e-collar feature as well. Our next Q&A session will take place on Thursday, October 2nd at 3 p.m. So I want to thank everybody again for logging in and watching. I appreciate all the support of the program. Please make sure you tell your friends and family to follow our pages, our Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube channel. I am actively using that data at this point, you know, for applying for grants since our main funding disappeared. So with that, thank you, everybody. We'll see you in October.